Hello and welcome to Otterwood Cottage, our small holding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. We're delighted to have you along with us. New Year's Eve today, and on the basis that I'm going to have to try and stay up till midnight tonight, I'm normally a 9 o'clock to bed kind of girl. I've allowed myself a bit of a lazy morning watching my favourite YouTubers work hard on their properties instead of working on ours. So it's nearly 10 o'clock already, and I've got the instant regret of it was beautiful sunshine first thing this morning, and now it's clouded over and feels much colder. So I probably should have just got up and started early while it was sunny. The plan for this morning won't surprise you if you watched yesterday's video, because I abandoned my post and didn't finish yesterday's tasks. So I'm finishing up planting the last of the fruit bushes and trees. So I've got some raspberries to plant here, 2 fruit trees to plant in the orchard area, and then we'll see where we get to with the morning and how much time I've got left. It may be quite a short video today. I'll see you on the other side of this. So while I'm planting these raspberries, I was reminded that Ali from My Rusty Garden, hi Ali, commented on yesterday's post to say effectively those raspberries are going to be thugs. She said it in a much nicer way, but she's not wrong. And if you didn't know, you might be quite surprised if you've never grown raspberries. I imagine most people watching this have, but if you've never grown raspberries, it can be quite surprising how bullish they can be once they get hold and how fast they spread. So Ali's point was, be wary that your lovely fruit cage could very easily be taken over by monster raspberries, and she's not wrong. We are prepared for that. We've had raspberries before on our allotment before coming here, and we were the ones in the first instance who were surprised by how much of the beds we originally planted them in they ended up taking over just in a year. We're prepared for that this time. You can control that. They send out suckers and appear, so it's just kind of extra weeding effectively. Although often we'll pull the suckers out and plant them elsewhere. That's something we might do here in the wooded area. We might set aside some areas for some fruit to grow that we don't mind sharing with the birds. So as you know, we're putting all of this in the fruit cage to try and protect some harvests for ourselves. But if we get loads of suckers, that's basically free food. So once they start to come, you can pull them up, replant them elsewhere. And if we get some harvests off those, great. And if not, the birds get to them all before we do, then that's fine, because we've got these ones in here. So that's kind of the idea. But we are aware that we're going to need to stay. This is going to be quite a high management area of the growing area generally, the veg plot. We're pretty lazy gardeners for the most part. We try and do, you probably picked up on that already, no dig gardening and various other things. We try and do as many perennials as we can and that sort of stuff. But for fruit, the value of it to us is so high that it is worthwhile us putting in the effort to keep it all well pruned, well tidied, and so this particular area will be quite a high maintenance area. This and the polytunnel where we'll be growing tomatoes and peppers will be the 2 areas we spend the most time doing tidying and looking after things. And then for the rest of the growing area, we tend to be pretty laissez-faire. We try and plant things like a diverse group of things in a bed, and don't worry too much about weeding. We wait for it to get quite bad and then do big weeding rather than constantly keeping on top of things, which is completely against the perceived wisdom and is not a suggestion. It's probably not the best way to do things, but with the time we have, we both work full time, so we prioritise the time that we have for the highest value crops to us, and the highest value crops to us are the fruits and the tomatoes, peppers, chilies. Everything else we find, other than when they're very tiny and they first go in and they're so susceptible to slugs, and there's really not a lot you can do about that anyway, once they get established, they tend to do pretty well if you just leave them alone. Nearly everything else we grow, in our opinion, or in our experience, has managed pretty well with a lazy gardening approach of, when we've got a bit of time and the weeds look really bad, we'll do some weeding. But otherwise, the approach of not monocropping, not having everything the same in one bed, so having a real mix of stuff in the beds, helps to keep pests away, does help to keep the weeds down a bit. This wood chip approach helps to keep the weeds back a bit. So we do some kind of preemptive things to help us. But then when it gets really bad, we give it a good weed. And weirdly, most people hate weeding. For most people, that's the job they hate and would rather not do on their plots. I'm a bit of an oddball. I actually really like weeding when it's a big job. When you're going in, I hate doing it with gloves on, so I'd much prefer doing it in warmer weather, because I don't enjoy weeding with gloves on. I find it really hard to get hold of the weeds and get them out, and nobody wants cold wet hands, no matter how dedicated you are. But in the warmer months, when you can get your fingers into the soil and pull all the big weeds out, I really enjoy that. There's nothing I like more than putting my headphones on, putting on some tunes or a podcast, and getting stuck into a really good weeding session. We have a bit of a running joke that we call it nutrient harvesting, because when we first started gardening at the allotment, and because we could only really get up there at weekends, and lots of the other people at the allotment were retired and up there every day, so they had immaculate plots, and ours would be immaculate after we'd weeded for a period of time, and then would be kind of all weedy and messy again until we got to it. So we had a running joke with the retired chaps at the allotment that we weren't messy. We were deliberately growing weeds so that we could harvest the nutrients for our compost. So we now tend to call weeding, as a bit of an in-joke in this house, we're going to go out and do some nutrient harvesting. But it is true in a way, in that building your own compost involves needing a lot of green matter as well as brown, and so you do need to have plenty of access to weeds, cuttings of veg and so on. So that's how we look at it. Bit of reframing, bit of thinking about things differently to make it a less tedious job. And I do love getting my hands, as I say, getting my hands in the mud when the ground is warmer. Not right now, it's not so pleasant now because you need gloves, and you don't feel that same connection to the ground in gloves, I don't think. And also it's just harder to get hold of stuff. So that's our approach to growing generally. But back to the original point, because I digressed, these are, as well as keeping those trees, as I said yesterday, keeping the trees nice and pruned so they don't outgrow the space, this is going to be quite a high maintenance area. So we're prepared for that, and the raspberries are well worth the effort because they're so delicious. We love raspberries, and my daughter particularly loves them, so they are well worth the effort. The other thing that slightly deviated from our original plan, we had wanted to grow all of the fruits away from the edges of this cage, but the reality is that the space just doesn't allow us to do that. So there is a compromise being made here, in that we are growing the soft fruit, so the raspberries, the strawberries and the loganberries, when they arrive, are all being grown along the edges. So they will grow up this outer cage material, which is like I think it's a plastic, it's like a strong plastic grid netting, which will eventually wrap around the edge of this structure to protect from the birds. But because the soft fruit will grow up that on the outer edges, or through it in the case of the strawberries, we're not going to fight that too much. We're just going to say, if it's growing through there and is on the outside of the cage, and some birds or other beasties come along and want to eat it, then fine, we'll share that part of the fruit with them. But there should still be plenty on the inside of the cage that they can't get to, which will be our harvest. So that was a bit of a compromise. Originally my idea had been not to have anything growing too close to the edges so that it didn't grow through, and we didn't have that issue. But size wise, this was the biggest fruit cage that we could get as a kind of pre-structured one. We probably could have tried to make our own, but you have to balance how much time you've got with how much convenience you want. And for this particular build, because we wanted to get it going this side of the growing season, we didn't have the time to have the inconvenience of building our own structure, so we did buy this prefab one, which has been, we're really pleased with it. We've had 2 storms, Bert and Dara, and it stood up to those, including the net across the top. When our friends came to visit, they said, oh, maybe that was a mistake putting the net up before the winter, because they had experienced quite a lot of net damage on their fruit cage. So we were really worried when the storms came, but we've been really lucky. None of it's ripped so far. That's not to say it will never rip. The reality is it's net, and so eventually we'll get rips and tears in it, which is why we've left all the extra around the edge so that we can use that to repair. But two big storms, significant storms, and no tears feels like a win. So well done First Tunnels, because it's really stood up to some pretty significant battering already. So that's raspberries. What else was I going to share with you while I was digging? Oh yeah, I was talking about weeding, and I'm having to actually do a little bit. Hard to believe given it's December, but some grasses and other bits and pieces are growing through in a couple of places. As I'm going along here, I can see there's a little bit growing through, so I'm just oiking that out as I go. I think I've said in a previous video that if anyone tells you no dig is no weed, then either they know a secret that we haven't found yet, or they're very, very lucky, because we haven't found that to be the case at all. It is a lot less work than having to double dig, which is what you have to do with grass areas if you don't use no dig. It is a lot less work than that, but it is still, you still have to weed, stuff still gets through. So where I'm seeing it here is in the places you would expect. It's where there's edges, so around the edges of these poles where the cardboard can't get all the way up to the edge, or where 2 bits of cardboard are overlapping. And nature is amazing and will find its way through the teeniest gap. There's a couple of bits here as well where I think the rabbits have been digging at the edges of the fruit cage area here, and just the slightest scratch through the cardboard, if the rabbits have managed to do that, and it's letting grasses and weeds through. So there's a little bit of weeding to do as I go along, but it's not too bad. And the grass is dying off underneath this no dig cardboard area, but it's only been down 6 weeks, so it's not completely dead, and we wouldn't expect it to be yet. We're just planting through and covering up. Okay, raspberries planted, off to do the 2 trees in the orchard. Alright, so I'm over at the little mini orchard, our collection of apple trees that the previous owners, or the ones built before those I think, had planted. And I'm going to add to the collection with a cherry sunburst cherry tree and a conference pear. I may be about to run out of battery, so I'll show you as much of this as I can. I've also noticed that I've lost the little windbreak thing from the microphone. They don't stay on very well. It came with 2, and that's the second one I've now managed to lose. I'm probably doing something wrong with the microphone. I don't know what I'm doing here. But anyway, if you can hear loads of wind, I'm really sorry. I will order some replacements. Hopefully they'll come by the time the next video goes out, but it may be a little bit windy. Bear with me and forgive me if you can.